So the painting that I picked was A Bar at the folies-bergère, painted by Edward Monet. And by the way, I'm going to butcher the title and the name of the painter a lot. And also everything else, but sure. This was my initial thoughts. So I liked how dark the painting was, and I thought the women in the painting looked a lot like Rose from the Titanic, because from the necklace that she's wearing to sort of her outfit, it really resembles Rose, in my opinion. And then some titles that I came up with this painting was Drinking at the Bar, or Dark Nights at the Bar, obviously, because we're at the bar. And here's the formal analysis that I got from it. So I see a lot of horizontal lines. You can see on the table, the countertops, even in the mirror that's supposed to reflect the countertops. Behind the woman is that? I think that's another reflection of the countertop. Basically, a lot of horizontal line is going on. And then there's also a lot of vertical lines that are going on in the back. So you can see the pillars in the back, vertical lines on the pillars, and also there's this like reflection, but there's like the reflection next to the chandelier, or in between the chandelier, there's like this blue line coming down, and it sort of separates the image. And I also think this image is separated into thirds. So we have 1/3 being the left, the empty space, the center third, which is the woman looking at us, and then the right third, which is the weird talking thing going on with this man and this woman. Some shape that I noticed were the rectangles on the countertops and like all of that countertop stuff. Some rectangle on the pillars. There's also some circles on the pillars. And then you sort of realize that in the mirror, it also looks like there's a bunch of rectangles. Just like empty, but also not too empty. You can see the view of the people, sort of like that. When I look at her, my motion path goes straight to her chest area. And I think that's really normal because we sort of just look at the center all the time, and the artist deliberately put her chest in the center instead of her face. Her face is more up than what a normal person would usually notice. So yeah. And then I move on to like what is going on to the side. So you see, like, I originally thought that this was a mirror, but also not a mirror. I thought it was another girl talking to this man, because it was really weird. You know, it felt really weird, and it still feels weird. Like, I don't know, just like the shape of her back is like different than the front, and it's weird to comprehend in my mind. But yeah, I switch between those a lot. And the next thing is the light. So the light from this painting is like coming from the top. It's one of those like museum lights that sort of adds like spotlight to paintings. And I think this light is mostly emphasized on, I want to say it's on the left top of the painting, pointing down, because her chest is very bright, and part of her, I don't know if it's called the forearm, but her arm, the top part of her arm is really bright as well. And you can see that it's not really on her face a lot, because you can see the shadows next to her nose, and then you can see that there's no light on the back of her head, because there's no light there. And then you can see how the bottles sort of like reflect the light, the shadows coming from like her hands and everything. And I would say that the color range for this is very cold. Like, this painting is very cold in my opinion. There's a lot of blue, a lot of grayish, not grayish blue, but like blackish blue. There's a lot of blues going on, although not the most prominent thing that you see. But there's also a lot of warm colors. So from the pillars in the back, it's this like warm beige color, but it's almost sort of surrounded by this blueness of everything. You can also see some other warm colors, like the color of her hair is very like goldish brown. Red is also a very warm color. Orange is also is a very warm color. But this whole painting is very cold still, even with those accents. So the red, the green from the bottles, they're all complementary. The blue on the mirror and the orange from the oranges are also complementary colors. And I feel like this is still very balanced despite using sort of contradicting color palettes in a way, because the painter sort of incorporates all of these colors into different places, but they like match up very well. I don't really have a specific feeling that I gain from this. I feel like we're just existing with this person. Like, I don't feel welcomed. I don't feel unwelcome. Actually, I kind of feel unwelcomed. Yeah, I don't think she likes me. Here's a little bit of a background about Eduardo Monet. So he was born in 1832 and he lived up till 1883 and he died in the age of 51. He was born in Paris, France, and a bar was painted in 1882, which is the year before he died, and it was said that he was very ill and he was trembly and he walked with a stick when he was painting this. Monet was really known for his brushstrokes, his color, and the creative lighting that he puts in his painting. And he's mostly known for his best painting of all, the Olympia. It's about this like nude prostitute person. Something that isn't really talked about is that he actually comes from a really rich and wealthy family. His dad's side is very legal, if that makes sense. I don't know how to describe this, but basically a lot of the people from his dad's side is like lawyers, or they were civil servants, and during that time wealthy people sort of already planned their path for their kids because they're so wealthy. They're obviously going to try to get them into well-paying jobs. And so Monet actually studied abroad to become a pilot after he failed the entrance exam. And another thing is that his mom is actually more of the artistic side of the family, completely opposite from his dad. His mom loved to sing. He has an uncle that loves painting, and apparently his uncle influenced him into the love of painting. And then, so at the age of 18, he decided to protest his father, and his mom secretly supported him, and he won. So yeah, that's good for him. He studied in this art place called Thomas Couture and Lorvay. I don't know how to pronounce that. He's also famously known for telling the models to act more naturally, and something that apparently he said is, "Do you stand like that when you buy a bunch of radish at the green grocers?" So you can tell that he's already really focusing on realism. He doesn't like when people pose, which is what was most popular at the time, which is models posing, or the rich people posing in order to paint a portrait of them. Yeah, he copied a lot from Velázquez and Goya. Trying my best. Okay. He's also famously known to paint the real world, and although he paints the real world, but he doesn't copy everything he sees. And I have a very good example of this in a painting, a bar at the folies-bergère, but it was in, I think, 1881, where it was painted, but it looked completely different than the 1882 one, which is the one we're seeing. And I'll just pop a picture of that up. So you can see that, like, in a way, he does paint the real world, but he also adds his own interpretation, or sort of manipulates how people look in it, if that makes sense. Sorry, I just choked. So, here's a little history lesson about Paris at the time. So, economically, at that time, rich people made a lot of money, but the poor people were even poorer because they made money. And 26 million out of 31 million people that actually lived on 55 cents per day, and 55 cents cannot even buy you a loaf of bread, and that kind of tells you how poor they were. And then there's this idea that the working class should actually be the rich people class because they're the working class. They make all the money. But somehow the people that make all the money is the poorest. So this triggered the Industrial Revolution, which is where the working class try to fight the wealthy. And this inspired a new art form of realism, which is completely different. As we talked about, usually at that time people painted rich people because rich people paid, and poor people were not emphasized. A lot of it was posed because that's what rich people wanted. And so realism was painting the normal lives of normal people. So there were some critiques from a few people. I just want to say I was looking for critiques, but it was very difficult to find critiques for this because I feel like this painting isn't as popular as his other works, but I hope that this still counts as critiques. So one critique is from Tim Marlowe. So what he thought of the painting was that it was impressive how this was one of Monet's last works, because we all know that he wasn't doing too well physically, but he was still able to paint a beautiful painting. And he said that the viewer is automatically placed in a spot where it seems like we're trying to grab a drink, and we're trying to get this barmaid's attention because we want a drink. So it was very interesting. And when you sort of look at this painting, you're sort of looking everywhere else. So he says that this is the act of looking, because you realize the woman with the opera glasses in the left background, and then you realize you see like the other on the right, which is like this weird interaction happening. And so he says that this painting really well reflects Monet. It is vivid contemporary life, but with edge, unsettling, sometimes subversive. The mirror world existed, but people usually didn't acknowledge it, unlike Monet. And this sort of tells you about how Monet really loves realism, because nobody else would paint the regular people of society. They would paint the people in the reflection. All right. So the next critic is Kelly Garver. So she said that when we look at this painting, the first glance is we think that this barmaid is bored. She does look very bored. And then the viewpoint in this painting is obviously the cleavage, because it's in the dead center of the painting. She also says that this painting has a lot of complex perspectives. So when you sort of look at this painting, you can't not look at it, because there's so many things going on. Again, the woman with the glasses, the person in the middle, the barmaid, and then the barmaid talking to someone on the other half. So it's very complex. And she said that when we realize the right, which is the back of this barmaid, is talking to someone, this weird old man, and they're trying to do some weird transaction here, you almost feel like her face sort of changes. Like, it's not boredom, it's more like tiredness or it's not really tiredness, it's like this, I feel sort of uncomfortable in this situation vibes. Also, she wanted to talk about, so Kelly talked about how this painting actually has a lot of triangles, and there's this symbolism that sort of comes with it. So some triangles that is seen is that the figure of this barmaid, so she has her hands sort of laid out and it's sort of like a triangle. And then if you look at her chest, there's this flower, I think it's called a corsage. This corsage is sort of like a triangle. And then the woman in the back left holding the glasses also is a triangle. And then you see in the counter where all the beer bottles are, there's a bunch of red triangles on these alcohol bottles. And basically her interpretation of these bottles is that these bottles are from the company Bass Brewery, and they basically started to sear their barrels in red triangles to symbol their products. And in a way, these triangles make, like stamping these triangles on the chest of his painting's protagonist with an unauthorized replica of the Bass logo, Monet not merely marks her out as a consumable product to be bought and sold, he reduces her further still by implying that her very existence is as disposable as a cheap counterfeit. Which I find very interesting, because that was one detail that I didn't really catch up on, but it sort of makes sense as well. And if you look on the left bottom, you can see that Monet actually made his own stamp. And it says Monet 18, I can't tell if that's 1822 or 1832, next to the red triangle. Actually, I think it's 1832. That was when he was born. So, yeah. So you can see how, like, this sort of, like, critique sort of also makes sense. In a way. But, yeah. Sorry, this is really long. I recorded this 3 times. I don't know why it's so long. Okay. I try it every time.